Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Seal of Approval, or Solo of Approval, as it seems to be at the moment. So Scrump and Trig are supposed to be joining me later. I'm not entirely sure where they are. I know that Trig is visiting Scrump. I mean, they might be having a catch up, but you know, if they don't come on, you know, those guys have been regulars on the show. They do kind of deserve a break, but like, even kind of without that, I wouldn't mind breaking away from the usual seal of approval format for this week and kind of going back to something which I really am known for, which is being Rose of Dawn, and specifically the kind of conversations I have on trans issues. So let's be honest, the majority of my viewers, the vast majority of my viewers, didn't subscribe to my channel. They haven't supported me on the likes of Patreon and Subscribestar for a live streaming channel, which is kind of what it's become over the last couple of months. And I keep on saying, you know, that's only temporary. That's only temporary, but it's only temporary, because I am working on the kind of getting myself back into the swing of doing actual proper videos. It's just been very difficult when you kind of get out of the groove of making those weekly videos, and especially with the absolute crap fest of the last year, it's been very difficult. I don't want to kind of make up excuses and stuff, but I kind of thought that I could talk about some of the ideas that I have for videos. So this is kind of almost like a sneak peek of the stuff that I have been working on, as I could just kind of bat around some of the ideas that I've been working on, some of the thoughts I've had over topics that have happened over the last couple of months. And like, you guys as the live audience here, you know, I'm reading the chat and stuff, so I kind of want to know your thoughts as I discuss these topics, and whether or not this could be the kind of content that you want to see. Because, like, as I said again, like, I know the reason why a lot of you have subscribed isn't because of necessarily because of Seal of Approval. And the thing is, Seal of Approval is a show that I love to do. It's something which is not particularly time consuming to set up. You know, it's just me and friends getting to chat about stuff. And again, I don't want to necessarily be typecast as a trans person on YouTube that only talks about trans stuff, because, like, I'm aware of how much of a stereotype that is. Like, you know, there's a hell of a lot more to me than that, and I hope that through Seal of Approval, people have seen that there is a lot more to me, especially politically, than simply speaking about the trans issue. And I think, you know, a lot of us who talk about this stuff, regardless of whether you are on my kind of what they call like trans medicalist, true scum kind of bent, or even some of the people who are more trans rights activists. You know, a lot of those people aren't just trans people first and foremost. There's plenty who are, like, don't get me wrong, but, you know, a lot of them have their own, like, hobbies and beliefs and stuff, and we don't always want to, you know, just kind of be typecast in it. So Rose Gold, just to answer Trake's question, so Rose Gold is kind of for non-political content. Rose Gold is there for kind of video games and want to get around to it, doing things like film reviews, like Disney reviews, that kind of thing. I just found it kind of difficult to work on any kind of video, but I kind of realized over the last week one of the reasons for that, which sounds really, really stupid, and I think it's kind of where I live. Like, when I lived in London, I had a lot more energy. And I think a lot of my recent weight gain can be attributed to being in a place where there really isn't all that much to do. You know, I'm going to the gym and stuff like that. But in London, you know, I always used to go out on big walks. It's a place which I find very, very energizing. And I'm planning on moving back there in the next month, like next two to 3 months. Just waiting for my boyfriend, Stephen, to get over here. And when he's over here, then we're going to be getting ourselves a really nice flat, and then we'll be back in London, which will be great. But I want to talk about the kind of video ideas. So no, just go over this one. So desiccated limbs. I've been rewatching a lot of your old videos, and Pillars of the Community and whatnot was very informative about news that is brushed under the rug, not just LGBT stuff. So the kind of approach that I've always had with my videos, and a lot of people seem to misunderstand almost purposefully where I actually come from in a lot of my critiques, is that a lot of these kind of problems which people might have coming out of the trans community is a lot bigger than the trans community. I mean, any of these, the kind of like victimhood mentality, it's not exclusive to the trans community. You will see it in any kind of identity politics-based movement. Like, you will even see a lot of similarities between a lot of the trans rights activists and the more gender critical side. Neither side will want to admit it, but they were kind of similar. And in fact, this is one of the video ideas which is tied in to into a very recent story. So this is kind of a your usual seal of approval kind of thing. And in fact, if this was a part of the seals of news, so this is a story. This is kind of still seal of approval. The seals of news. They have they've bought these stories. So here's a story from Pink News that was uploaded yesterday. So for those of you who might not be aware, J.K. Rowling, who gets a hell of a lot of abuse every single day on Twitter. You probably all heard a lot about the campaigns to try and cancel her. You had authors who were a part of the same kind of publisher as her, basically threatening to walk unless they sacked her, and then they didn't want to do that because these people were nobodies who no one really cares about or has ever even heard of them, let alone any of their books. And so naturally that was never going to go anywhere, so they just turned that into a little bit of a protest. But she has been receiving a disproportionate amount of abuse online, and one of the big things which happened over the last week is she highlighted one example of this abuse, which is effectively a threat to send her a pipe bomb. I'm sure there will be people who will try and justify that as just bants, just a nice little bit of a joke, but she was completely correct in taking that seriously. I mean, anyone who actually sends out a threat of violence that specific should be reported to the police. That in itself is not freedom of speech. When you're threatening violence against someone as an attempt to shut them up and shut them down, regardless of whether you're it's a gender critical person receiving it or a trans activist receiving it, neither side of it, it needs to be dealt with by the authority, and the authority need to be able to take it seriously. But this article from Pink News follows a trend from a lot of people who have seen over the last couple of days. As you can see, or for people who aren't watching the screen, title of it is J.K. Rowling death threats are vile and should be condemned. The same goes for transphobic violence. Now, the entire article is basically written as, yes, it is wrong for J.K. Rowling to receive death threats and to specifically death threats. They didn't really care all that much about the kinds of abuse, because a lot of these people who are, who are kind of trying to virtue signal at the moment, they're the same kinds who will accuse her of, encouraging violence against trans people, which is a very, very common accusation leveled at anyone who speaks out against trans rights activists. But what it really wants to talk about is the threats of violence that trans people receive online. And whenever you talk about this, you will always be able to find someone who will say every single day, I receive threats of violence. And they mention such here. Fox Fisher, who says to Pink News, the narrative that's being created in the media in regards to trans debate is often the complete opposite to reality of things. Trans people suffer great amounts of abuse and harassment for advocating for their rights every single day, both on social media and in their real life. Personally, I receive abusive comments on social media every day, ranging from the offensive name-calling to transphobic statements to death threats and serious abuse. So these are 4 different categories of abuse on social media: name-calling, transphobia, death threats, and serious abuse. I mean, I would consider death threats and serious abuse to kind of be the most extreme one could get on social media. So I'm not too sure what he means by that. So he goes on to say, like, this is simply for advocating for a more fair and just world where trans people are treated with dignity and respect. So what their argument is that, well, you know, all we want to do is just live in peace, which isn't necessarily what these people want. Like, what they want to do is to compel people to agree with and believe in what they believe. Like, they're not coming at this as an agree to disagree, let's just live in peace. It's kind of almost impossible for their angle to be that. They want everyone to toe the same line. And that kind of thing is generally going to get like a little bit of pushback, but that's not to justify any of the abuse that these people do receive, because some of them do. I don't think I think that there are some people who are involved in this who certainly will kind of over-exaggerate the kind of abuse that they get. But, you know, you can have a look at someone like, say, Katie Montgomery. You know, she's someone who I strongly disagree with on a lot of topics, but we are relatively friendly in like kind of in private. But like I've noticed that, you know, she will get an anonymous tweet aimed at her. There was one that she shared the other day talking about, you know, like, oh, the day of the rope is coming for you trannies and stuff like that, which, you know, is I would say is serious enough to report to the police, that kind of thing. I mean, that's someone indicating that they want to inflict violence on her. You know, that is something which needs to be condemned. But one of the problems which I have with the way in which a lot of this narrative has come out in the last couple of days is it's just simply being highlighted that someone like Rowling, and Rowling isn't the only person on the gender critical side to receive these kinds of threats and abuse. It's being highlighted, but that's not really enough. You can't talk about that her being highlighted without saying, well, what about all the trans people who get abuse every single day? And in fact, you will see later on in the article is people basically insinuating that Rowling herself causes a lot of this abuse. Jonathan Van Ness, who I believe is from the New Queer Eye, saying people shouldn't be making violent threats against anyone, but that doesn't change the fact that J.K. Rowling is using her platform to spread violence against trans people all the time. So he is openly accusing Rowling of violence. And that's a very specific allegation. And they can't talk about anything which they can't really condemn anything which seems to come from their side without pulling this, yeah, but like, violence is wrong, but Rowling is violent. And it feels very kind of tone deaf, especially when you need to take into account that a lot of trans activists who do kind of big up these kind of threats of violence online, and there are a lot of them. And the thing is, they very, very rarely get called out. This one is only kind of having these articles because it was highlighted by J.K. Rowling. Had this been highlighted, had this been myself who'd received a pipe bomb threat, you know, you wouldn't be seeing articles about this in Pink News. You wouldn't be seeing anyone condemning it. In fact, a lot of the time when you talk about a threat of violence, they will much rather focus on the alleged transphobia of who's been targeted, like they're doing now, like they're doing with Rowling. And whilst I don't think a lot of trans activists are going to be ones who go out there and actually, you know, stab people or are going to go and assault and kill and murder and all of those things. And I say that because there actually aren't many instances of this happening in real life. I mean, when we talk about attacks by trans activists against gender critical people, Tara Wolff is the one which always jumps to mind. Tara Wolff assaulted I can't remember what her name is. It's kind of gone from my head. But it was at Speaker's Corner a couple of years ago. Tara Wolff ended up assaulting her. A lot of support in the community for Tara when that happened. You had things like the NUS, writing articles in support of Tara, who had assaulted someone that she disagreed with. But that's one of the few examples that you really see in real life. It's kind of almost surprising that there isn't more, considering how easily that action got a pass. Can I wait a second? We need JK to continue her bravery. She's so needed. Like, I think that it is actually brave of her for kind of taking this stand, especially with the kind of fan base that the Harry Potter books have. Like, granted, it is a multimedia empire at this point, But a lot of the people who grew up with Harry Potter have turned into the blue hairs. And so she is kind of, she's kind of saying, like, I don't give a fuck about you guys anymore. So Comic Nut 64 with the $4.99, thank you. I'm sorry, but words can't be violent unless it's a direct threat, like in JK's case. And here's the thing, I don't even like Harry Potter. Like, I don't think words can be violence unless it's a direct threat. And people like Jonathan Van Ness will not be able to point to a single example of J.K. Rowling ever issuing a direct threat. They can't. Now, they will mention about how, some of these, these accounts that people are highlighting are, they're just nameless, disposable accounts. But a lot of that kind of ideology does come from somewhere. The fact that nobody in the community really speaks out against it does allow it to fester. Like, I don't think that a lot of these people are going to carry out their attacks, but certainly the way it reflects on a lot of trans people is atrocious. And that none of them ever seem to sit back and think about this. They never actually look at how this looks to anyone outside of their queer bubble. And from reading this article, from the kinds of people who are being commented in here, so you've got Mimi Mum, I believe, is connected to mermaids. I'm not 100% sure on that because I know that she blocked me. So not a single gender-critical transphobe has actually been beaten, raped, or sent bombs because they're gender-critical. Trans people, which is kind of, well, actually, no. One person has definitely been beaten as like a real-life example, so that's wrong. But it's not common. But then saying trans people, however, have been attacked in part as a result of GC transphobic rhetoric. I don't think that's true. And you'll get trans activists who will try and pin the likes of Julie Bendel or Jermaine Greer and say, these are the ones who are influencing violence against trans people. The rising transphobic hate crime wave that we keep on being told about, that we're in the grip of, the most transphobic time to ever be alive. But I don't think, when you look at some of the perpetrators of the various crimes, in particular, when you look at the trans murder rate in America, these aren't the people who are going to be saying, well, J.K. Rowling thinks that women don't have penises, so I'm going to go out and just shank them, just a random trans woman on the street and steal her purse. Because a lot of the time that's what's happening. I mean, even with the murders, it's very difficult to be able to pin an actual motive on a lot of them. And so they can't make the assumption or like the statement that people like J.K. Rowling are encouraging violence. The violent attacks which happen against trans people, which are rare, which are incredibly rare, especially when they consider words to be violence anyway, the rate is nowhere near as much as these people make it out to be. It's simply not true. It's nowhere near as big. But they want to, they want to try and pin any kind of violence on the likes of J.K. Rowling. And when you see these kinds of half-hearted, like, yes, it's wrong to be, to threaten violence, but J.K. Rowling says violent things all the time. Like that kind of does give people a bit of an impression there about, what is it you're actually saying? We got other statement here. J.K. Rowling supporters have literally threatened to mutilate my body. Well, why haven't you reported that to the police? Report it to the police. If you can tie it back to J.K. Rowling, like if any of these people could tie it back to any of this back to J.K. Rowling, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they actually take this to the police? And J.K. Rowling is like their biggest enemy. One of their biggest enemies. I mean, she's someone who should have been towing the line, and she's not. Why don't you report this to the police and actually kind of take her down? They never do, though. They'll just go on Twitter and just say, the source for all of these is just trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. These are this is what J.K. Rowling has done. If you can connect J.K. Rowling to any of this, by all means, take it to court. Take it to court. Do it, because that'll expose it. But none of them will. Absolutely none of them will. And that's what all of this kind of comes at. I mean, this entire article is just written in such a way of saying, the real victims are trans people. Trans people always have to be the fucking real victims. And like, I've received threats online as a direct result of the kind of content that I make. These come from one specific part of the internet. And like, these are relatively rare that come directly to me. I certainly notice other people, even people who might have like a smaller reach, get a hell of a lot more abuse than me. Someone like Mars gets a lot more. Gets a lot more of this like toxic content aimed at him than I do. But I don't kind of buy this idea that, everything, all these threats of violence that trans people have to encounter every day. I mean, like, I don't see it in the trans people I know. Like, I remember years ago when I was at a like an NUS thing, because that was where I first met my good friend Papa Horror Show. We were at this NUS thing, and there were trans people there talking about how every single day they get hurled with abuse. People try and beat them up and kill them every single day. And the thing was, at the time, I was incredibly, like, visibly trans. Like, I had not worked on my voice. I looked like a mess. And, like, the worst things that I got stares. I got occasional comments of, "Oh, that's a fucking man." I got those kinds of things. But, like, I never saw this, like, tidal wave of abuse that everyone else seems to go through except for me and all the trans people I know. I don't understand why I seem to live in this bubble where we don't get abuse, but everybody else does. Like, that seems kind of, it's kind of like a little bit of an itchy chin moment. It's like, what's actually kind of going on there? Lonely seal of approval. Yeah, it is. Like, I'm assuming that that Scrump and Trigger otherwise they're otherwise preoccupied. But that's fine. So anyway, I know I've been kind of rambling a little bit about this. I mean, I've had a couple of drinks as well, so it probably doesn't help me being all that coherent. But I said that I kind of had a video idea around all of this, and so as kind of like, not to kind of spoil that idea too much, because I don't know when exactly I can get around to doing this. But one of the big problems with the violent rhetoric isn't so much that people are going out and carrying out attacks. You don't see a lot of trans people doing it. As I mentioned earlier, there are notable examples of it happening, so you can't say it never happens, because it does, but it is rare. It is very rare. And when it comes to the other side, the only example of like gender critical people actually kind of going out and attacking trans people that I've really seen was something that occurred in the 1970s in San Francisco. But again, like, if you're expecting me to believe, the women who are tweeting out, "Women won't weesht," which I don't know what weesht means, but apparently it's a thing which women don't do. Or they won't do. They won't weesht. Like, I'm not expecting to see like a group of like 50-year-old like kind of middle to older aged women, kind of like hobbling after trans activists with like knives and guns. Like, that kind of bullshit is not going to happen. Be quiet. No. Unless you're saying that about somebody else. So the problem which I kind of have isn't so much that people, that trans activists are going to carry out violence, or not, nor is it that gender critical people are going to go out and carry violence. I don't think either of these groups really, in terms of a lot of the screeches out there, they're not going to be. Okay. It means, so weesht means be quiet. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were just telling me to be quiet. Oh. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So Sorry about that. So what was I saying? The problem of it isn't so much that, you know, people are going to be violent, but you never know when someone is actually going to eventually, you know, see this and see how there is no backlash against any of the violent rhetoric and eventually carry something out. I mean, a lot of this stuff is very quietly condoned because it's, you know, speaking truth to power. It's the oppressed showing how, you know, just how fed up they are. And again, this is not exclusive to trans activism. Look at any identity politics driven movement and you will see a lot of this. You know, like, I'm fed up of having to explain to it. Just, you know, you do, you know, you need to look into this. You know, you need to do your own research and come back to me with the exact answer that I want. But a lot of it just, it looks incredibly bad to the wider world when people kind of, like, you know, either talk it down, try and brush it off as though it isn't a problem. You know, don't mention it. Don't talk about why J.K. Rowling is getting, you know, pipe bomb threats. What we need to talk about is us and that we get threats. You know, like that just comes across as you really don't care about anyone but yourselves. And besides, there are plenty of opportunity for trans people to talk about their victimhood. It's all, for a lot of people, it's all they ever do. And so even when you have someone like, you know, something kind of trending that this is a problem which people who speak out against trans activism get, they can't even let them have that. They can't let them have that. And instead it has to all come down to, well, no, you got to talk about us again. You have to talk about us. You know, keep talking about us. You know, we'll play down what happens to you, because what happens to us is far, far worse. So, you know, you all need to care about us, because we don't really care all that much. I mean, when you read through a lot of these responses about it, they don't actually care. A lot of them don't really care. And hell, if some of you might remember a couple of months ago where there was a bit of drama on Twitter with a non-binary YouTuber who had once been on my channel, who had tweeted about a friend of the channel, Marcus, the what's his name again? It's like the based tranny or something. So yeah, they like tweeted about how they wanted to curb stomp him. And when called out on it, it just turned into, oh, you know, it's just a joke. It's just a bit of a laugh. And then I ended up getting sucked into it. And what happened was two interesting things. First of all, after trying to highlight, well, you know, you're basically issuing a threat here, this non-binary person then proceeded to make a big woe is me thread. Again, very similar to what's happening with Rowling here. They always have to go back to the woe is me. You know, look how hard in this instance, it turned out that some people said some mean things after they appeared on my channel. I looked through all the comments on that video, and there was absolutely nothing that was anywhere near as bad as they were trying to make it out to be. They also tried to insinuate that I had something to do with 4chan going after them, which, you know, which was kind of dumb. So there was that. So there was the woe is me, I'm the real victim here kind of thing, even though I've said and done something that is really stupid. I mean, had I threatened to curb stomp anyone, there is not a chance that they would let me do a woe is me. But we've talked about this in Seal of Approval a lot. The idea that there is two different sets of morality for these people. They have one where they effectively get to act in whatever way they want, and it's always justified. And then there's the other set of morality, which is for their opponents, and their opponents always have to behave. And it's impossible. It's impossible to really kind of live with. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was there was another non-binary person who I believe that she became famous for calling out, you know, calling out. I did like, you know, the little bunny ears thing then when I realized I'm not on camera because I look like a hot mess right now. Well, yeah, she called out Calvin Garrett for being an online bully. And her response to this curb stomping thing was, actually, no, I'm serious about this. I think he should be curb stomped. My response to her apparently misgendered her. And like she uses they pronouns as well as a pronouns, as in a, like the Fonz, like Fonzie from Happy Days. And the response after I misgendered her, yeah, all the responses afterwards, not a single one of these people cared about the fact that she wanted to curb stomp Marcus. None of them cared. What they cared about was that I had misgendered someone, and that was the real crime here. That was what they really cared about, and that in itself was a very telling incident. It was very interesting to kind of watch it, because it was just a confirmation that when they don't really care about how they look to the outside world. They don't care about how, threats of violence look. What they care about is people really towing the line. And that's kind of what I want to talk a bit about and delve into. In fact, delve into a lot of the kind of rhetorics that a lot of these people have with the way in which they go about their quote unquote activism, like the big coming out speeches, which we've seen over the last year. I mean, like Philosophy Tube, you had was it Elliot Page? There've been a few others as well, where their coming out will, rather than just be a case of, I am now a man or I am now a woman, and this is actually, things can be a bit difficult, but I've never felt better. And this is the right thing to do, and thank you everyone for my support. There's been a lot of people who have kind of come out in that way and like not gone down the more positive, I'm getting my life together kind of route that I think a coming out can be. Coming out as being trans, actually starting that transition. If you have gender dysphoria, it is like an example of you getting your shit together. You're taking it seriously, but you need to put in the work in your transition. You can't just, put on a pink t-shirt and say, well, that's it. I've transitioned, which too many people do. But, you actually kind of working through a transition, I think is something that a lot of people can be proud of. Yeah, Jim Sterling is another one. Jim Sterling is definitely another one. Which in fact, I've kind of been looking a bit at Jim Sterling. But the thing is, a lot of them will use their coming out as a springboard to activism, which I don't think that an early days trans person should be taking part in, because they don't have the life experience. They don't really understand much about transitioning or living as the gender which they now claim to be. You have Philosophy Tubes talking, for example, who really, like, initially when I saw her, I thought, like, actually she's done quite a bit of work. She in her transition, but it was after reading her I am now the most important trans person in the UK and constantly sniffing her own farts about how great she is, that I kind of realized what she's trying to do, which is really to position herself as the leading voice in a community. She wants to be the representative of trans people. She wants to be the queen of trans. Like that, and same with the likes of Elliot Page, who, hasn't been out all that long. Like, neither of them have been out for a year. It's like, we're talking about 6 or 7 months at the longest for both of them that they've been out publicly. But they are hailed as icons, and we kind of saw this a bit with Caitlyn Jenner, when she first came out. But she was never positioned. She never kind of sought to position herself in the community in exactly the same way. Caitlyn Jenner was more about, getting just making money, being, getting those, like, the magazine covers and stuff. I think that's more of what that was about. Whereas a lot of what we're kind of seeing more of, like the likes of Elliot Page, who seems to look like he's about to burst into tears every time he's interviewed because of how hard it is to be trans, and he's now the face of trans men. There's it's not like there's lots of well-known trans men anyway, although I would say someone like Buck Angel is a good example of a guy who's got his shit together. Like, there are, the thing is, a lot of trans guys also are relatively, like they don't really want to shout that they're trans from the rooftops. Like, I knew a guy once who appeared on Big Brother in the UK. I think this was in 2012. And like, it initially, like, not many people knew he was trans before he went into the Big Brother house. Like, I was one of the only people who knew. But then when he went in, he kind of did start to make it a big deal about how, he's actually a trans man. Like, I remember there was this one bit when, they were asked, like, all the housemates, what is your, what's your party trick? And everyone would say, like, something's, banal or whatever. But then when it came to him, he was like, oh, I have a vagina. And it's like, that's not really a party trick. That's just your fucking genitals. But then, like, after he did the show, after he kind of traded on that a bit, he's, doesn't talk about it anymore. He's now much more concerned with being a chef, and he's actually a very good chef. That's the kind of stuff which he wants to do. Oh, there's a super chat that came in a while ago, so I apologize. James88 with the $4.99. It's under the guise of activism to justify what they do, while simultaneously accusing the other side of violence. It's something they do a lot. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. It's all of this is, as I said earlier, the double standard that people work at. The idea that it's fine for them. Like, they won't actively go out there and criticize or condemn neither threats of violence nor things which happen as a result of the policies that they endorse. And that second one is a particularly big one because the likes of Jessica Yaniv, who's, those 2 years ago that I did my video on Jessica Yaniv, like, that's kind of mad. That was when my channel blew up, so it's almost like a 2-year anniversary of my channel. Likes of Jessica Yaniv was only able to get away with what he did because of the kinds of policies and the kinds of things which were advocated for by a lot of influential trans activists. Like the idea that a penis which is a woman's penis is not really any kind of difference to a vagina. If you're not comfortable being around a penis, and you need to check your privilege. Hell, we've seen that a lot over the last week or so, last couple of weeks rather, with the protests of that Californian spa, which is in itself very, very interesting in how apparently that event didn't actually happen, but the person who was accused of doing it let that rumor roll. And the people who are carrying out the violence are a lot of Antifa activists who seem to be attacking people over a rumor. But of course, Antifa always get a pass on this kind of thing. You will never see them condemn Antifa because Antifa can do no wrong. I have now lost my train of thought. I'm really sorry, guys. I'm really sorry. I was actually kind of hard like a train of thought there, and I ended up going on a bit of a tangent, and it's gone. I blame my hay fever. Like, I have really, really kind of nasty hay fever right now. But what was I saying? See, this is where I need my co-host. Like, Scrump is just not here. Yaniv, yes. Yeah, so as I was saying about Yaniv, a lot of what kind of happened with the likes of Yaniv and Karen White is the direct result of a lot of what trans activists call for, but without them ever acknowledging that people could take advantage of of what they're advocating for. And so there is never any kind of responsibility. And a lot of this I put down to how they don't want any kind of border on gender. Anyone can be anything. But because they don't put in a single limit, they, by their own ideology, like they can't tell people that, maybe Yaniv shouldn't be pestering Asian women to wax his balls. Like they can't really say that. And if they do say it, which they do occasionally, it's incredibly disingenuous and just as a way of using a Mott and Bailey tactic to just, pretend that's not what they advocate for. Oh, hello, Cammy. Oh, hello. So, guys, I've got something to show you. It's Cammy. And she wants to get down. So as you can see, I look very, very rough. So I'm not saying on camera all that much. But yeah. That was Cammy. She's getting pretty big. So what was I saying before Cammy? Cammy? Queen Cammy. Oh, I actually have the super chat from Charity. Thank you for 99. Hope you're doing okay after the craziness that is the UK this week. Annoyed that people can send JK threats, but us calling it out is what's wrong. Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of these people just work on completely separate pillars of morality. There's one for them. There are things that it's fine for them to do. But then for us, you look better than I do. The heat isn't doing anyone. I am fucking awful today. She's Cammy. Yeah, a lot of people saying that Cammy is getting big. Like, she is huge. But the thing is, she is nowhere near done to being fully grown. Like, she is. She's 7 months old. Like, she's just over 7 months old. And yeah, she is good. She is a good cat. Oh, Portrait Seal is here. That's a blast from the past. Hello, Portrait Seal. So I've been talking about a couple of different kind of video ideas, and it's kind of almost like a part of a series on just where a lot of the problem is with the kind of rhetoric the trans activists do, but then also not just looking at it as a critique of, like, just like, oh, all of this is shit, because I don't think that's not really enough. It's easy to kind of point out everything shit. It's talking about why, like, the kind of damage that this does, but then also my advice for how things could be improved. Because I think that's important to take into account. So here's another one. So what's your thoughts on Ollie London, the non-binary trans Korean? I think it's an epic troll. I think it's absolutely amazing that this guy has done what he has. He's he really does kind of put a lot into it. Oh, my skin is ridiculously blotchy. Yeah, I'm definitely not going on camera again today. My skin is awful today. Yeah, it doesn't help that I got a bit hay fevery as well. I'm a bit very hay fevery. So, what do people think of those kind of ideas then of videos? Or, like, actually, if someone you could put in the comments, what kind of content would you actually like? Specific kind of content would you like me to have a look at? Because I do have some other ideas as well. So, like, for example, I have been thinking of other people for Pillars of the Community, because when I get into making a Pillars of the Community video, it can be very enjoyable. Yeah, I need to get some like lotion to my skin, because it's pretty horrendous today. So yeah, I've been thinking of doing some more Pillars of the Community as well. He claims to speak Korean. I have a Korean teacher who's a YouTuber as well. He did a video of Ollie last year. His Korean skills were that of someone who just started learning. Oh yeah. Like, I have no doubt that a lot of this is probably something which is very new for him, and it's all for attention. Like, he knows how outrageous this is, and he knows that he's probably going to get a bit of a bite back from the kind of like the trans/MB community, because he's comparing being transracial with being transgender, which these people don't like at all. Yeah, so Charity said that everyone should join Rose of Discord. Yeah, everyone should. Let me see if I can put a link to the Discord and the chat. Let's see if this works. Yeah, so I put a link to the Discord in the chat. if anyone wants to deal with it. Or anyone wants to join, rather, not deal with it. So yeah, I'll probably just go to be streaming for 15 more minutes. Because I am kind of feeling a little bit under the weather, a bit with the stupid hay fever. Well, yeah, I mean, it will, again, two sets of morality. It's fine for them to gatekeep, but not for myself or for Blair. I think you're doing any kind of news. Sexuality shouldn't be a personality trait, so I can see why you'd want to distance yourself from when we talk about LGBT stuff. Yeah, and that's kind of one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons why I don't particularly like just kind of talking about trans stuff, and I do kind of enjoy making the seal of approval. I actually feel really self-conscious about being on camera before, because I've looked at an absolute state. So I'm probably going to have to edit this video in post to remove the bit when I appear on camera, because I do look absolutely awful. So yeah, what was I going to say? So anyone got any other kind of ideas of things which which you would like for me to discuss in particular? Yeah, well, I'm still feeling a little bit cold. So so everyone should come and join the Discord server. Actually, you know what I could do? No, wait, I can't do it. Maybe I can. No, I can't. I'm still trying. I forgot what kind of streaming thing I'm using at the moment. I think that I might just be able to put on a video game or something and just kind of chill for a little bit. It's sometimes kind of difficult to, I wanted to be able to bounce off some of the stories of the week with Scrump and Trig, but they, I think they're having some drinks and stuff. Yeah, that's cool. I know. Oh yeah. I want you to look into the rise of mental illness faking on TikTok. I mean, that is something which is even far predates TikTok. I mean, a lot of that comes from Tumblr, from years ago. Are you going to do a vid on that guy who looks like a circus act who convinces people they're MB? Which one? That's a legitimate question, because there are a lot of people, is it Jacob Tobiah, Alok Menon, Travis Alabanza? There's a lot of they're kind of like a genre in and amongst themselves. Are just people whose identity seems to be just being weird. That's their identity. That is who they are. Alok. Yeah, so that's Alok Menon. So I have actually been thinking of doing that for a while. I think doing one on Alok Menon. It might be interesting to include some of the other kind of Troon squad that he hangs out with. People like Jacob Tobiah. There's a few really weird ones who all hang out together. Have you ever heard of post-ops getting prostate issues? No. I don't see why they might not. I mean, if it's something to do with the post-op, I mean, itself, no, that's not really something I'm kind of aware of. The fact that you have to say which one says a lot. Well, yeah. A lot of them have, a lot of them are basically kind of cookie cutter. Yeah, I haven't actually watched the video on Alok that Blair did yet. My understanding of it, though, because I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it, but I know that I believe that she commented on some of the kind of weird statements that he's made in the past. I think I have some kind of details of this, because I've got a lot of kind of. Let me have a look. I might have actual kind of. Yes, I actually have. Yeah, so I think what she is talking about had something to do with this. Yeah, so basically what he says in, like, I believe in the radical notion that little girls like the rest of us are complicated people. There are no fairy tales and no princesses. Little girls are also queer, trans, kinky, deviant, kind, mean, beautiful, ugly, tremendous, and peculiar. Your kids aren't as straight as you think they are. I've been a cute little girl. So a lot of men has been a cute little girl. No, he hasn't. And as a gender, non-conforming younger adult, let me tell you, everywhere along that spectrum, I've been complicated and strange. Well, yeah, I'm sure you have been complicated and strange, but you're not everybody else. Yeah, so he's kind of known for making these relatively strange comments, and so I think that's one of the things that Blair discussed. If I am going to have to actually sit down and give it a watch. I'm sure that she's probably like found a bit more of it, because I think the title of the video was like that he's a predator. So like I'd actually be quite interested in knowing whether, whether he actually has done something which is dangerous to someone. Yeah, I've been considering doing something on Alok for a while. In fact, Alok's not the only one. But Alok also does have a weird amount of influence. I think Alok Manon is one of the people who was hanging around with Demi Lovato before she came out as being trans. And the same with what's his name, Sam Smith. But being non-binary doesn't come out of a vacuum. Like being a trans man or a trans woman, like you can come out as being a trans man or a trans woman without having much, if anything, to do with the trans community at all. I've yet to meet a non-binary person who wasn't initially influenced by the community. Every single non-binary person I've met, every single non-binary person I've read about, every single one always are influenced by the community around them. Every single time. And so it just seems to be a massive coincidence that all of these non-binary people, which is a genuine gender identity, it just always so happens to only appear in one specific community. Like, it doesn't happen. You're not seeing it with the lads. Like a group of the lads going down the feathers, and then all of a sudden Dazza is now non-binary. Like, they're not the kind of people who are coming out as NB. The kind of people who are coming out as NB already have a lot to do with that queer circle. And a lot of it, I think, is just a different way for them to kind of express how they feel, which is kind of, which is fine. You do you, but it becomes a problem when you then demand that other people see you in that way. And like, there is no compromise on that. It's like, no, I am not a man or a woman, even though I have massive beard and a big dick. I'm not a man. It's bigoted to call me a man. It's making people play along with their idea of themselves, which, a lot of time isn't really accurate. It's kind of the problem which I have with a lot of it. Like, I can buy the idea that people aren't going to identify as male or female and could struggle with that. That is something which I've always said is, something which could be completely accurate. It just so happens that every single time we have highlights from the non-binary community, they always are either like fairly leftist. They've always come from, that they hang around with a lot of people in the queer community, or they have previously associated with the queer community and have moved away from it. Like seems to be there's been a few people who have contacted me privately who have said, like I'm right wing and I'm non-binary, but even when there's one person who I've been meaning to get back to, but I haven't just yet. But apart from them, there's like everyone else I spoke to. It's initially started with, well, I used to be, quite, radically left wing. I would hang out with the queer community, and it's like, well, there we go. You instantly got the answer. Like, and that's a very, very common trend with a lot of it. Like, even if their belief eventually kind of changes on, on how the world should run, they still came from that queer bubble. That's where they were influenced. So I remember at a house party at my house in Cardiff, I was pre-warned by a guest about another guest not to call this NB a girl. Apparently, she would bite your head off for misgendering. Well, yeah. I remember my very first experience with a non-binary person ever was at this NUS conference I went to, a proper horror show. And in one of the evenings, there was a non-binary person who I thought was just a trans man, and she was furious, absolutely furious that people thought that she was a trans man because she wasn't. She was non-binary, and everyone has to respect their pronouns. And I was just like, what? That was genuinely the first time I'd even come across non-binary, and it was someone who was furious that nobody else recognized it. And that was a weird way of being introduced to it, especially as now they're trying to force it as like a real kind of mainstream view when it isn't. A lot of it is really, really not mainstream. It all comes from one particular community. Always really has. Even when they mention about different, like non-binary people throughout history in different cultures or whatever, all of those are cultural roles. They're all cultural roles. They're not necessarily recognized as like this whole special individual thing. They don't ignore the biology of that person. And a lot of it is, even when they look at things like the Hijra or Kafawe or any of these kind of like third gender ideas in like various cultures around the world, they normally have very specific spiritual roles. It's not like they then are like just kind of do whatever the women do. Have you heard of a trans person called Trans Girl Therapist? She is trans far leftist who advocates for patients to discriminate against right-leaning therapists because they are unethical to her. Well, I haven't heard of this person, but someone holding that viewpoint is incredibly common, and I don't think she is particularly unique in saying that. A lot of these people are very against the medical pathway. What their idea is of treatment is that you can just go to a pharmacy and pick up hormones in the same way you can pick up paracetamol. Like that is kind of what these people want at the end of the day, which is insane. But they, that's kind of what they do. That Proper Horror Show is such an amazing podcast. Oh yeah, she's one of my best friends. In real life. She's one of my in real life best friends. So yeah, everyone should go and subscribe to her. So I think I'll probably kind of call it a day in the next couple of minutes. My nose is kind of stuffy, as a lot of you can probably hear. But I just kind of wanted to just have like almost like a bit of like an informal rap about how I kind of feel about some of the topics in the trans community. But yeah, let me know what all your thoughts are. I want to kind of get back to doing proper videos when I can. But it's kind of been very difficult to kind of find the time over the last kind of couple of months and everything kind of being shit. Yes, so she has a lot of very good chickens. In fact, when I first started my channel, all the way back in 2018, at the time I was living with Proper Horror Show. And she didn't have chickens then, but she does have a cat called Gatsby. Gatsby, I think, still features in like a lot of her videos, but if you look at some of the classic old school Rosa Dawn videos, you will see Gatsby occasionally. Like he will rock up in there. So it's kind of like a Gatsby shared universe between myself and Proper Horror Show. But yeah, you should all go and subscribe to her. So that would be great. How about the history of trans? I kind of have been interested in looking at that actually. Certainly, like not necessarily just talking about the history of trans specifically on trans, but a lot of how the kind of like the more radical movements have come to the position which they have, because I think that history is very interesting. I miss the old videos, but like the Wednesday 8 p.m. routine. Like, yeah, I do miss doing the videos. Again, a lot of it is trying to find the time to do it. Because I want to. I do want to. But there's a lot of work, and let's even before then work on the videos and stuff. And yes, he really does look like Wilford Brimley. It's kind of uncanny, especially because he's now gotten older, and so he's a lot more grump than he used to be. Like every year, he's kind of a stout cat. Can you do a critical look at the Robin DiAngelo scam? I don't know. Potentially. James, miss the days of us boring LGBT lot from ABBA Pride. Oh my god, I thought I recognized the name. Shit. Yeah, so we actually did go to uni together. Yes, ABBA Pride. ABBA Pride was actually kind of fun. Like there were some weirdos. Like there were some real weirdos from it, and some of the people from that community have become like a bit of a running joke for myself and Proper Horror Show. One individual in particular who we kind of discovered has become the most glorious failure in the history of mankind. But anyway. Oh yes. Oh, this is thing which I haven't mentioned to anyone. Yes. So basically Tailed Feature went on a walk. I think it was last week. I think it was. And on his walk, he came across a seal. He came across a baby seal on the beach, and apparently it had been there for a while. When he got home, like he told me about the seal. And I recommended that he contacted the I think it's like the SSPCA in Scotland, so it's like the Scottish Society or whatever of animal things. And like he didn't have any signal, so I made the call to the kind of like the Scottish rescue thing, and so they were able to go out there. I never actually heard back from them, so I don't know for certain what the outcome of it was. I would like to think it's good news and that the seal is safe, but I sadly don't have the confirmation. I gave them my number to give me a call back on, but they never reached back out to me. But always try and help the seals. James, we'd all be getting drunk, and there'd be one ginger-haired girl drinking tea in the corner. James, right? You need to look up what happened to that ginger-haired girl. Because, like, all I can say is, like, I can't. Thing is, I can't dox this person. I can't. Like, this is, that people kind of have their own personal lolcows. This is kind of like mine and Proper Horror Show personal lolcow who you're talking about. So anyway, I'm going to end the stream now. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks everyone who sent in super chats as well. I really appreciate it. So Seal of Approval will be back next week. Hopefully, Scrump will be there. But obviously, I need to clear out this damn hay fever because I look like a mess and I feel like a mess. Anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you all next week. Bye. Oh, wait. Hold on. This is Seal of Approval. And even though this has been like a solo episode, we still need to do a Seal of the Week. And there is some Seal news. Even though there was kind of some Seal news with Tailed and the Seal. But I did find one story to share. So Seal gets into back garden in Lincolnshire. So basically, a seal just wandered into someone's garden. And this seal apparently has got up to all sorts of hijinks before. So here she is last year jumping on someone's paddleboard. So there is some good news going on out there. There is some good news. So yeah, the seal had a nice holiday in Lincolnshire. Now hopefully she's back in the sea eating fibs. But yeah, so at this point I now actually am going to end the show. So everyone who kind of stuck around then actually got a bonus seal news. But anyway, thanks everyone. I'll see you all next week. Bye.